Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and on this afternoon match day special, I will be covering the Celtic versus Livingston league encounter. Initially solo, we may have some Acsom contributors as the show rolls in, but that gives me more of an opportunity to speak to you guys tuning in. Thanks. You are tuning in from all over the world as per usual for your Acsom fix. Celtic face Livingston. It is the first time since 2013 that Celtic have gone two league games back to back and been beaten on both occasions. 2013, those two games were against Motherwell 2-1 and Ross County 3-2, both away from home. We were 2-0 up against Ross County. If you can tell me who scored the winner for Ross County, give me a shout in the comments section. Don't Google it. See if you can remember the name of that particular player. But on to today's game, the first thing we'll do is have a look at the lineups, and then we'll speak about them blow by blow, and then we'll try and see if we can make sense of everything else that's going on at Celtic Football Club at this moment in time. The Green Brigade are back. Did you see the video of them travelling from the Celtic Supporters Association on London Road up to the park? It was great to see. We need unity. This is the first step towards that, getting the fans back in the stadium. And I've been supportive of that action since it happened. I've been pretty vocal on a Celtic state of mind. And you do see in the comments section and also on the socials, some people do disagree with that. And that's fine. It's all about debate, isn't it? So let us know your thoughts about the Green Brigade. What can they give us extra today that has been lacking in terms of the atmosphere at Celtic Park in the games that they've missed? The starting 11 that Brendan Rodgers has selected is as follows. In goals, you've got Joe Hart, Alistair Johnson back in at right back, even though he was hooked at half-time for Tony Ralston in the game against Hearts. A very disappointing defeat that was against the Tynecastle club. It was lifeless. It really was. It was almost without fight, desire, passion, mentality. These things that are a prerequisite for every Celtic player. Every player that pulls on that Celtic jersey needs to have those qualities in spades. They cannot be taught. There is a sense of inheriting them if you're brought through the ranks of a winning club with a winning mentality. And that was my biggest concern, I guess, when we brought in so many bodies in the summer. In the left-back position, Greg Taylor, he's played every single game this season, has Greg Taylor. We're going to go through the players individually, have a look at where they are just now, who needs to improve, who needs to step up. And in the central defensive area, we've got Carter, Vickers and Scales. The midfield three, no Rio Atati yet. We didn't expect him to be back. So his jersey is today worn by Paulo Bernardo, the youngster on loan from Benfica, and he lines up alongside captain Callum McGregor and the player who I feel has been the best player of the season, and Matt O'Reilly. We'll come back to him in a moment as well. Across the front three, Kyogo's the spearhead, and he'll be flanked by Maeda and Palma, and on the bench we've got Scott Bain. Yang makes a return after his injury to the shoulder. We've got David Turnbull. Will he not be at Celtic after the January transfer window? Kwon, for a second week running, is on the bench. We haven't seen him in competitive action for Celtic yet. We've got James Forrest, the experience is Jamesy. We've got Tony Ralston, another now senior pro in the team, Stephen Welsh, who came back in for the side against Feyenoord, and Mikey Johnston, who has come in for quite a bit of flack this season, even though he has played a few games under Brendan Rodgers. Livingston, David Martindale's side, come into this without a win in 9, having scored only a couple of goals in that 9-game sequence, so they are not on a good run of form. And today, for me, is still going to be testing. There's no guarantee. It's a must-win game for quite a few reasons against Livingston today. And we cannot start slowly. We cannot have that dip in tempo. Here is the lineup for Livy: Jack Hamilton, Tom Parks, Eo Obeleye, Scott Pittman, Bruce Anderson, Jamie Brandon, Captain Jason Holt, Joel Nubley, Andrew Shinnie, Louis de Luas and James Penrice. On the bench, we've got George, Montano, Kelly, Welch Hayes, Bradley, Nottingham, Guthrie, Lenningham and Lawal. That's your lineup that's going to be facing Celtic today at Celtic Park. The Green Brigade are back in. What do you make of the starting 11? I'm going to bring in as many comments as possible on this pre-match bulletin. Ewan Boy Martin, great to see you, Ewan, at the Johan Mjalby event and at other events throughout 2023, and hopefully I'll see you again a number of times throughout 2024. Hail to you and everybody else who's tuning in, wherever you're tuning in, all across the globe. Let us know where you are watching Celtic today. We get messages from all over the world from Celtic supporters, and it's fantastic to see you popping up in the comments section, just like Double Denim, happy match day hoops. Loving the atmosphere already, need to get the intensity levels up and grab a few goals. Intensity, tempo, these are words that I think are often overused, but I'll tell you something, when they're not there, you don't half miss them, do you? And I think that the intensity of the crowd can definitely feed the intensity and the energy of the players on the park. It's something that we've seen during the pandemic, and it was not a good outcome on that occasion. And it's something that we have seen over the last few weeks. It's got to be said. Paddy Burns, Merry Christmas to all the Celtic fans all around the world. And Paddy, Merry Christmas to you as well. Daniel Hamilton, Merry Christmas to PJ and all the Acsom team, the vast majority of whom are at the game today. And quite a few of the others are overseas. So yeah, left here all by my lonesome. And no matter what happens, we will be streaming live every single game. That was the vow that we made during the pandemic, and it's not going to change. Yes, it doesn't allow me to get to the games, and my big brother and my dad and all that don't mind that because they can use the tickets. But until such times as I can get somebody to sit in the hot seat on a permanent basis, possibly one of our overseas contributors, I will be here to talk you through winning, losing and drawn. And there's been far too much of the latter two categories this season for my liking. Okay, Joe Hart, let's start off with Joe. I was talking through the week about certain players who really need to step up. We know their capabilities. We know that they are able to go out today, for example, and beat Livingston, who are not a good football side and they're not in good form. And you look at Joe Hart, you look at the experience of the man. England international, played at the very top level, both for club and country. Manchester City, huge honours there, played a lot of Champions League football. And he was coming to that stage at the end of his career where actually he had an opportunity to sign for Celtic a season before he did. We could have signed him instead of Barkas. The conversation was had. We went for Barkas. We know how that ended up. But when Ange Postecoglou spoke to Joe Hart, there was something in his personality that Ange put a huge emphasis on. Obviously not a player identified by Ange Postecoglou, because we'd already spoken to him a year previously, but certainly the deal was done on his say. So he came in, and for a long time, I felt he was the best pound-for-pound signing under the big Australian. And you know what? Over the first two seasons, I think that would be a great debate and a great argument to say who was pound-for-pound the best signing between Hart, Rio Atati and Matt O'Reilly. This season, he's coming for a lot more criticism. And if I was to pinpoint areas that I think haven't been great this season from Joe Hart, it would be basically the fact that he's not commanding that area. And I think that for 2 years, there was a trio at the back with Joe Hart, Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers. And within that trio, there was an understanding between the three. Not telepathy as such, but when you've got a partnership at the back and it works, and you take an element out of that, and it's not been the same since Starfelt's left. Absolutely no doubt about it. But Joe Hart needs to then step up. All that experience that he is given credit for and he's lauded for, he needs to bring it to the fore. He needs to command his 6-yard box. I mean, that goal that Lawrence Shanklin scored last week was amateur hour at Celtic Park, whereby it was just a flight lofted into the box. He's in acres of space. The goalkeeper has to command the area. The left back has to be far more commanding, and Liam Scales needs to have a more of an awareness as to what's going on in that area of the park. Terrible defensive error for Celtic, and I think Joe Hart is at the heart of it. Pardon the pun. Yeah, he needs to take complete command and control of the situation. He should have done it before. I spoke about Feyenoord being the first game after that Kilmarnock debacle, whereby we had to start getting into a groove and find our momentum with one eye on the 30th of December when Rangers come to Celtic Park, and we are in a dogfight at that point. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Convince me otherwise in the comment section that Celtic and Rangers are not in a title fight as we sit here right now, because it's going to take a lot to convince me otherwise. Get your comments in. Joe Hart, there's nobody else in the Celtic squad who's going to take his gloves, and that's a fact. And it's not a great thing, actually, because I think we realised that we had to have some kind of succession planning with Joe Hart, and that's why Benjamin Siegrist was brought to the club. If you were to ask most Celtic fans, and in fact, go back to the bulletins on Acsom and ask the question domestically, outside of Celtic and Rangers, who's the best goalie? You probably would have said Siegrist. He was performing really well for Dundee United. And if you're signing a backup, then, you know, he had bags of experience, obviously. Started his career, Siegrist, at Aston Villa under a certain Martin O'Neill. Moved about a wee bit, Swiss international, and he's been nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And when you're on 14, 15 grand a week for a couple of years and you've played 2 games, then it's not exactly value for money. You're not pushing the goalie, are you? And I don't think it helps Joe Hart. Scott Bain, by all accounts, great professional, great guy in and around the park and the training ground, etc. But he's just sitting there as a backup. And I don't know about you, I would not be convinced if I was going into that game on the 30th of December. This is always the yardstick, isn't it? Would you be confident going in with any other goalkeeper on the books other than Joe Hart going into that game against Rangers? No chance. Looking forwards, we do need a new goalie, and it needs to be a top-class acquisition. Will it happen in January? Not so sure. I'm not sure if other problems around the park has maybe changed the priority list, but we definitely need a new goalkeeper in the fullness of time. You move into that defence. I had the audacity yesterday to suggest that Cameron Carter-Vickers is immune from any kind of criticism, which is fine if you're playing brilliant every single week. I don't think he is. I think he's another guy who needs to step up, a bit like Joe Hart. He doesn't have the same level of experience as Joe at the highest level, of course, but he's experienced enough. There's one thing about Carter-Vickers, and he doesn't share this with Nat Phillips, another player we brought up from the EPL. Prior to him coming to Celtic, Carter-Vickers, I think, in terms of competitive appearances, had played some cup games for Spurs, but he hadn't played a lot of football for them. What he had done, though, is he'd gone out on loan and played a lot of football, regular football. Nat Phillips has never done that. So Carter-Vickers has got plenty of football and plenty of experience in him, and I think that he needs to step up. He needs to be more commanding. I don't think we've seen those performances that we became accustomed to, I think, from Carter-Vickers. We're probably spoilt for a spell there, where in the big games you could count on him. And by the way, I mean, other than that poor error against Lazio at home, I'm not saying he's making mistake after mistake, misplaced passes, etc. It's the commanding aspect of it. I want these guys, Joe Hart, Carter-Vickers, the spinier team, to step up and drag other people up to their level as well. We spoke about O'Reilly, JP and I, about the fact that he was given Palma dogs abuse on the park. Love it. That's what you need. You need to tell somebody they're in a fight. You need to tell them that the standards have dropped and it's not acceptable. So yeah, Carter-Vickers, I want to see a tremendous performance from him today, leading into Dundee, and of course the big one against Rangers on the 30th. And alongside him, Liam Scales. You go back a year ago, he's played for Aberdeen against Darvel, and he's on a loan that there was a few people who, James French, for example, always supported him at Celtic. Acsom contributor based in Ireland, and quite a few in the comments section have done too. I was quite vocal in that, had he left at the beginning of this season, I wouldn't have thought it was any great loss. And he's done a Ralston on us, hasn't he? He's come in. It's not a purple patch. He had basically played in his best position, and it's culminated in him winning a Man of the Match award in the Champions League against Feyenoord. And that's all within, you could bookend that year, couldn't you? Darvel defeat, one of the biggest shocks, if not the biggest shock in Scottish football history, right up to Feyenoord and winning the Man of the Match, this guy that we signed from Shamrock Rovers in the Irish League for 500 grand. And he has become, at this moment in time, really pivotal to the Celtic setup, and certainly has built a partnership with Cameron Carter-Vickers. When you look on that Celtic bench, in actual fact, obviously Scott Bain we've already spoken about. What's your defensive options? As well as Tony Ralston at right back, and we'll be chatting about him when we come to Johnson. You've got Stephen Welsh. Now, Stephen Welsh, for me, is someone, again, who I didn't think was going to get game time under Brendan Rodgers, and it would have been best for him to move on for the betterment of his career. Rodgers gave him a 4-year deal, and he's sitting on that bench before Nat Phillips, who's still on loan from Liverpool, of course, Kobayashi, who seems to be on his way out back to Japan, if reports are to be believed, and also £7.3 million worth of centre defensive talent in Nawrocki and also Gustav Lagerberg. So you're keeping quite a lot of bodies out the team there, quite a lot of value, quite a lot of spend in the summer transfer window. And it's bizarre. It really is. And it's been part of a major discussion about recruitment over the last couple of months, I would suggest, in and out on Acsom, whereby we're bringing players in that the manager doesn't fancy. He doesn't fancy the talent of them, the speed of them, the personality of them in the dressing room and on the training pitch, because he has said in press conferences that counts for a lot in his book. And these guys are not getting a look in. How many of them, let us know in the comment section, the guys I've mentioned there, how many of them move on in the winter transfer window? Stephen Welsh is going nowhere. He's just signed a 4-year deal with Celtic. He's going nowhere. Scales and Carter Vickers are your first 2 picks. Underneath that, you've got Phillips. Do you continue the loan from Liverpool? For me, it's a no. You've got Kobayashi. It's not worked out. He gets his move back to Japan. You've got Nawrocki. How difficult is it to make a call on him? We've not seen enough of him. In the minutes that I seen, I thought he looked good. There was an element of his play that reminded me of Joso Simunovic, who is a player that if you're able to forget the injuries put into one side, as a player, he had the attributes of a top-class central defender for Celtic, to the point whereby, you remember, Torino tried to buy him, or was it Roma? Over in Italy, they tried to buy him from Celtic, and the fee they were talking about was 8 to 9 million quid. He probably, I think, failed a fitness test and a medical, and the deal fell through. He's a player that Nawrocki reminds me of, and he's not getting a look in. So how's he looking at training? Obviously not good enough in terms of what Brendan Rodgers is seeing. And then you've got Lagerbielke. One of the absolute enigmas of the transfer window, whereby he was thrown in because we had no one else. And, he played 5 games. I thought there was elements of his games I had to improve. But he looked like a defender. I mean, Swedish Defender of the Year last season, breaks into the Sweden national side, scores against Moldova, albeit not great opponents. He does the business at international level. And then he's dropped. He disappears from view. Comes back in against Feyenoord, scores the winner. We're all singing Lager, Lager, Lager. Never seen him since. It is bizarre. And these are the things, these are the random selections that actually, an hour before kickoff today, you're looking at the social media channels wondering who's going to get in this team. Are there going to be any surprises? Was there a surprise in the starting 11? Was Bernardo that surprise? Would you have played David Turnbull? Obviously, Iwata is still injured, and Brendan Rodgers yesterday confirmed that Odin Holm is suffering from illness at the moment, so that's why he's not in the squad. So that's where we are with the centre half area. And on the right-hand side, special mention to Stephen Welsh, actually, when he came back in for his second competitive start of the season against Feyenoord. I thought he played really, really well. It was obvious that he was a bit rusty, but I thought he did really well. And I hope that, like Tony Ralston, and to a lesser degree James Forrest, he's a player that will be a backup player for Brendan Rodgers this season. And when you need to call upon him and that type of player, then you can rely on them. They're not the type of player you want to be going in all guns blazing into a Champions League game. It's no ideal. But in terms of a second pick, I think Welsh, Ralston, that type of player would be key for Celtic. And I'm going to throw in there, there was a few moments this season that I felt that would be the best that Mikey Johnston could attain in this Celtic side. And now of the view that he's not going to even attain that. I think he needs to move on to pastures news. But we'll get into the more offensive areas in a moment or two. Right back, Alistair Johnston. How impressed have you been with him this season? He was hooked last week at half-time. Tony Ralston comes in from the cold, as he often does, and just applies himself as if he's never been out the team. I think he's the ultimate professionalist, Tony Ralston. I often joke that he's my favourite player, but in actual fact, there's a lot of truth in that. I love a player who is committed, a bit of a cult player, which I think Tony is, and very reliable. He's never going to win you the European Cup. He's never going to get a £5 million transfer to Anderlecht, but he's a player that I think second tier in your squad is very, very useful. In actual fact, I think on the left-hand side, that is the level of Greg Taylor. But because of other circumstances and also his own form, to be fair to the player, he was or has been our first pick now for the best part of 2.5 seasons. I don't think that he has progressed at all this season. I think he's regressed and he needs replaced. It does Greg Taylor. He's targeted by every side, both domestically and when playing Champions League football. He's a weak link. Physically, he's not up to scratch. In terms of positional play, he's always out of position. The worst example I've seen this season was against his former side, Kilmarnock, whereby you watch that winning goal and ask yourself, where is the left back? Because that's where the ball's coming down. It's coming down our side. He's in a number 10 position. He's actually on the other end of the park, completely out of position. He leaves Scales wide open. It makes Scales look bad. He then has to come across, and then Phillips is left with two guys to mark. So the knock-on effect of the poor positional play Greg Taylor has been highlighted this season. I think under Ange, he got away with it to a large degree for two reasons. The first one was on that left-hand side, we had Starfelt and Maeda, who were covering for Taylor time and time again defensively. And also, Greg Taylor was doing a lot of good work in the kind of middle area of the park as an inverted fullback. And, that's the kind of moments that you remember from Greg Taylor over the last couple of years were more offensive attacking moments than his defensive qualities. So there you go. That's where I am with Greg Taylor now. I think it's time to get ruthless and brutal in the January transfer window. And there's a couple of players I've already mentioned in Mikey Johnston and Greg Taylor who I don't even think Mikey's second best. I think he moves on. Greg Taylor, you keep him as backup. You move on Bernabe and you bring in a new left back. Paulo Arujo is apparently that man who is going to be the target. Also, a wee bit like Carter Vickers, Alistair Johnston, he came into the Celtic side. He became very quickly a fan favourite, bit of a cult player himself, loves a battle. And I don't think he's been brilliant this season. I really don't. I don't think that he has been a standout. And in actual fact, when you're hooked at half-time, I think the gaffer agrees. He is a quality player. We had a number of discussions on this show, time and time again, around whether or not he was an upgrade to Josip Juranovic when he left the building last season. I think it's a debate to be had. He was kind of heading in that direction, wasn't he? But then, again, I think he's kind of stagnated this season, and that's maybe due to the form of the entire team, and it's not been great, really. It's been topsy-turvy, Jekyll and Hyde, up and down, all that kind of stuff, all those cliches. And Johnson suffered a bit from that. So we'll be looking for a good performance from him today. I don't think he's as good at overlapping as Tony Ralston. And the reason I'm bringing up that at the moment is I think that's key to Kyogo, right? You look at, I posted a few highlight reels this morning on the social media channels of Kyogo and the kind of chances he gets on the end of. And you're looking at balls being cut back, and they're kind of zipped in and whipped in low and fast. And he's got the touch, he's got the positional play, he's got the speed of thought to get in front of the defender or to delay his run so that if the ball's played behind him, the defender has stepped forward and he's in acres of space. And he gathers those balls for fun. He scores many of his goals from that type of position. He has it in his locker to score different types of goals. Of course he does. You just need to look at, for me, his three finest moments, his three defining moments this season were against Lazio, Atletico Madrid and Rangers. And those goals had far more of the individual brilliance about them and finishing technique about them than the type of forward play that I think he's become accustomed to. It was the type of ball he would get for fun from Maeda, Abada, Jota and Tony Ralston. In actual fact, he has set up quite a few of Kyogo's chances over the piece. We need to start tapping into that area of the park and that style. And I think Maeda on the left-hand side is going to be key to that. He knows Kyogo really well. There's a relationship, an understanding between the two Japanese internationals, whereby I think there's going to be chance creation today between Maeda and Kyogo. And we need the wee fella to get back on the score sheet, don't we? We really do. We need to get him back, finding his shooting boots, 1 goal in 12 appearances. That's not the Kyogo that we know and love. So let's hope that the wee guy gets in amongst the goals today. There's loads of great comments coming through. Thanks every single person for supporting a Celtic state of mind this year. Here we go. Loopy33, let's bring you up. Turnbull, Bernabe and Mikey J all gave up last week. should never play for Celtic again. But at least one of them probably will, the way this season is going. Okay, that's an interesting shout, Lupe. As I said before, we've got to be bold and ruthless. And quite frankly, I agree with you. I would move on all three of those players. I think they've all had sufficient chances in Celtic jerseys to prove under more than one manager their worth. And under Brendan Rodgers, neither of those players look the part. I don't think they're going to have a future at Celtic. So, yeah, it might seem harsh, but sometimes you've got to be brutal. And we've got to streamline and trim the squad with far more quality on the right-hand side then. Unless Maeda and Palma switch, which they are capable of doing. We've also got Palma. And I think of all the summer signings, Palma's the one who is on the top of the pile for me. He's shown more than any of the other signings that he could well turn out to be a decent enough acquisition. But he is rough around the edges. He disappears from play. His defensive qualities are not good. And I think the data guys would back that up as well. And he seems to have a bit of a mentality issue as well. That's maybe the type of play that Rodgers was talking about, whereby if things aren't going your way, you dig in. I've used Jota as an example. In season 1, I don't think he had that mentality, but in season 2, we've seen a lot more from him, whereby when the chips are down, that's when we really need you to step up. It's not about step overs and fancy footwork. If you're 1 or 2-0 down, you just need to get us back in the game. And Jota learned that pretty quickly. Palma needs to do it now because we're in adversity. It's not like we're playing free-flowing football, winning every game. Palma needs to dig in. In the midfield area then, we've got McGregor, O'Reilly, and also we have Bernardo. O'Reilly and McGregor, 2 of only 3 players given pass marks by Brendan Rodgers last week, the third being Scales. I think that speaks volumes for some of the other guys with experience I've been talking about in the likes of Joe Hart, Carter Vickers, Alistair Johnston. These guys, Rodgers wasn't happy with their performance last week, and he clearly wasn't happy with David Turnbull, and he gets hooked at half-time. Who do you play, though? That's always a big debate, and Bernardo's been thrown in there. Again, I'm undecided on the player. I wouldn't be too worried if we cut his loan deal short at the end of the year, a wee bit like Jens and Abelgard, get him sent back to Benfica, because he's not really stapled his name into the Celtic side, has he? But I'm going to be looking at him with interest. Alan Morrison tells me he's a great player off the ball, and you might think, oh, that's brilliant. But apparently, that's very useful for the likes of McGregor and O'Reilly. Frees them up, blocks that kind of space that they thereafter don't have to cover. So Bernardo, very much a team player, and you've really got to look out for the work that he's doing. So that, for me, is my take on the team. I think it's strong enough, should always be strong enough, 7 days a week to beat this Livingston side comfortably. But there's a mentality, there's momentum, there's confidence, all these things that you don't get on the data sheets. They're not metrics that you can actually gauge and quantify, unfortunately. And that then comes down to Brendan Rodgers as a man manager and being able to tap in to the core group and then be able to then nullify the kind of threat. And I say threat in inverted commas because it's a different type of threat you have with Livingston. The threat that you've got from this side is the fact that they're going to park the bus. Let's throw all the cliches at it. They're going to park the bus, absolutely. And what you sometimes need to do with these teams is draw them in. Draw them in a bit, let them attack. You've got to be strong enough at the back for that, and then hit them on the break. And what you're looking for there is you're looking for Scales, who's got great pass. He's got great distribution, long and short. And Carter Vickers, miss out the midfield, hit the wingers. Hit the wingers in behind the defensive players, or an overlapping fullback if they've got the pace. And once they have that, then they're going to be looking for Kyogo. Once Kyogo is set free, I think he could end up scoring a couple today. It'd be great if you got a hat-trick. In fact, Cameron Meikle, thank you for your support. Always an absolute pleasure. People supporting the Acsom channel. Macaroni pie for dinner. Matt Gunner, it looks as though you're on the wrong stream, mate. And it worries me a wee bit, the obsession that you have with Celtic. But thanks for getting involved. I'm sure you'll have a great time in the comment section. Anyone, however, who comes on to bam any of the Acsom regulars up or the genuine contributors up will be kicked off the stream and banned from the channel, because it's all a bit sad, isn't it, guys? Here we go. Taylor has always been targeted, says John. McLaughlin, I think it's just been more highlighted this season because we're not playing well, John. We are in a bit of adversity, and we're not playing that free-flowing football. And I think, to be honest, it's one of the things that we're at that stage where it is a priority now. The left-back area definitely is a priority. It's about kick-off time here at Celtic Park. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. 500-600 strong on the live stream. We'll be back at half-time, and I say this every week, hopefully, to talk about a brilliant first half where Celtic have been playing this freedom, scoring a few goals and bringing Kyogo back into the game. That is what we hope. Hopefully the atmosphere is better as well. Thanks every single one of you. We'll see you in 45 minutes. Thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.